Okay, this is DT2740, and this is Module 2, and this is more of a theory lesson than what you're supposed to do for the lab, but you should draw this for the lab. I think that's a pretty easy start to getting things done. To get the directions for this, you can just go to my instructor page, and then right here, DT2740 Module 2 part. You can just open up that PDF and get started in drawing the part. It's going to look kind of like this. So I'm going to go over some commands, and you can just see how they work and use them if you need to. So there are, from Module 1, you'll always use line, circle, trim, extend. You'll always use those commands. But here's some additional tools you can use. So you already know if you type line, over here, type line, and you can just click and draw lines. Or you can use the ribbon and click and draw lines. So that's easy. And that's pretty handy. But if you were to create a layer called construction, make it green. I don't know, I always make it green. And make it not printable. So I'm going to double click that and make it my current layer. I could then draw lines in a construction layer, and that's not printable. So if I were to say plot and select like a PDF writer and preview just what I have on the display, you're going to see none of that's going to print, because I said in the layers manager that it was not printable. So that's right. Let me look at the layers manager again. Right there under plot, it says not printable. So then that's a line. Everybody knows how to do a line, right? Because it doesn't matter if you started today or if you've been doing this for 20 years. Everybody has to start off drawing their drawings with just the basic functional line. So next we're going to do the X line. So X line, I'm on a construction layer, so that's handy. I'm going to say X, click on it, X line, and without my ortho turned on, it lets me just draw a line. And it's a line that goes forever in both directions. If you have your ortho turned on, then it's going to restrict it to vertical and horizontal, which is pretty handy if you're trying to lay out your construction lines for your orthographic view, because they go on forever. So I can keep zooming out and you can see that they go on forever. Similar to, let's see, zoom extents. Similar to the X line is you can use array. Select on array, I've got my orthographic turned on, and you can see it's got a fixed point on one end, but it continues out forever. And if you don't have your ortho turned on, then you can see it's just any angle you need it to be. Pretty handy. I think that's pretty handy when I like to make my miter lines. So I can type array and tell it like at the distance at this point when you're doing a polar coordinate doesn't really matter. So I'm going to say at 10 caret for the less than symbol and 45 degrees, and I now have a pretty good miter line. It goes on forever. It's perfect. So then if I need to create my construction lines, I can just bring those up and then bring those over, and I've got good construction lines for my top and my side view. So then that's 3 different line commands. So then if you want to make multiple lines, mline, I can use the mline command, and you can see it's creating multiple lines. And the big advantage here, like if you're working on something like a floor plan, is that you're saving a little bit of time because it's trimming out the corners for you. And the mline command, you're going to have to just sit down and play with this. You can see when I type mline, I get 3 choices down here for justification, scale, and style. So you're going to have to create multiple M lines to see and actually use these to see how they work. So that's an M line, and then a polygon. So polygons are pretty important. We use polygons a lot in a lot of different situations. So if I type P line, oh, I'm sorry, I said polygon. Polygon. Polygon's pretty cool. So let's say I needed to make, whoops, polygon. Let's say I needed to make a square. Okay. So in AutoCAD, a polygon is any three-sided object or more, right? But the actual definition for polygon is any four-sided figure or more. So I'm going to create a polygon, and I said four sides, click it, and I get a couple of choices: inscribed and circumscribed, and hit enter, and I get a polygon, right? So if I click it, that polygon is actually made out of a polyline. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you this polygon again. I'm going to create a circle. That circle is going to be, let's say, a diameter of 1. Pretty small, right? So I'm going to say polygon again. Now, all these tools are up here. If you're a ribbon person, you can find all these tools up here. So polygon, number of sides, I'm going to say 6. So say I'm creating something like a nut. And hit enter. Where do you want the center? I want to put the center, so I can either have my object snaps turned on, but I don't have a quadrant or a center object snap, or shift right pick and say center, find the circle. Okay, I get two choices: circumscribed or inscribed down here at the bottom. So let's do an inscribed first. So I can either type I, or you can actually just pick this, and you can see I'm creating my polygon, and specify the radius. So I'm going to say it's 0.5. So I have an inscribed 6-sided polygon, and you can see all the points are on the inside of the circle, right? So if that's an inscribed, that means if I do a polygon again, and I want a 6-sided, I want to put it on the center here, and I want to tell it circumscribed, and my radius is 0.5. I can now see that my polygon, all the flats are touching the outside of the circle. So that's the difference between inscribed and circumscribed. Okay, there is a pretty handy function called a rectangle. So just REC, or you can get it from the pull downs on the ribbon, and you can draw a rectangle. Now it's important to note that this is a polygon. So it's a single line that runs in a circle, runs in a rectangle. So that being said, we might as well talk about polylines. And right here I have a polyline with a width set to 0.25. Or when you say polyline, P-line, start point, you always got to start it first. Then down here I get some choices. And I'm going to tell it width of 0, ending width of 0. And now you can see that same polyline. You can see that it's the same thing. It just doesn't have a width. Now, you can use the explode function and explode a polyline, and now that's broken down into just a line now. So like I have this rectangle, it's a polyline, I can explode it, and you can see that it's just a polyline. So let's say I have something like this rectangle and I want to edit it, and I want it to be a polyline. So see, it's 4 lines, it's broken into 4 pieces. I can use the pedit command, pick it, and it says down here, this is not a polyline, do you want to turn it into one? And I just say yes, and then I get all these other choices. And I'm going to use this one here, this J for join. And I'm just going to select, I'm only select 3 of them so you can see it, 3 of them. So here I have a line, and I'll escape. Here I have my new polyline. So I can do pedit, select it, and let's say width. And new width for the whole thing is 0.25. Okay, so here's a handy thing. I could say line, and I want to say, whoops, I should say P line, and I could say width 0.125, and ending with 0, and then drag it down and say 0.125, and I get an arrow. That's pretty handy. I like to use that for my the arrows on my cutting plane sometimes. So that's just fun. There is a command called sketch. Oop, I'm not ready to go there yet. I want to talk about let me explode this. One other command that's pretty handy, especially if you get into like some 3D AutoCAD stuff. What I have here is 4 lines. Okay, they're not polylines. I exploded it. This is just 4 separate lines that make up a rectangle. Let's say I have an instance that I need to create. I need to create a rectangle out of that. So you could just go in and say rectangle and kind of just pick it and draw it. Okay, now I have a line over a line. So if I move my last created thing, so move, enter, L, enter, you can see that there I have my new polyline that I created as a rectangle, and here's my original 4 lines, right? So let's say it's a little more complicated than that. Let's say my shape looks like this. Alright, so I'm going to just trim that out. So what am I going to do with that? Right, I need to draw a polyline. Now you could go P-line and go from endpoint to intersection to intersection to intersection to intersection. And you could go through and you could draw this and go all the way around and make a closed polyline. Right? You can do that. But this is so much faster. So I'm going to use the boundary command. So it's typed out like kind of like boundary, right? Whoops, I misspelled it. Boundary. So I use the boundary command, and if you use the hatch command, this works a lot like the hatch command. So here I have the boundary creation. Pick point, I want to pick inside of there, and I hit enter. And look, nothing happened, right? Nothing at all. But if I move the last object I created, it created me a single polyline for that space. That's pretty handy. It's really handy if you start getting into more 3D AutoCAD. I use this a lot in some commercial construction where I'm doing like a drop ceiling and I have to do a reflected ceiling plan. Really handy for that because it allows me to just create a polyline for a big space, and I can then start working on my drawing. So now to your assignment. I'm going to erase all this stuff, right, because we don't need all that. Here's your assignment. Draw this, right? If you have troubles, that's all right. Send me a message and I can give you some pointers. Things to remember that you may have forgotten. All dimensions are transferred from one view to 2 views over. So anything in the top view, the dimensions for the side view come from the top view, and vice versa. Project your information around. Now I've gone through and I've created these layers, and you can just duplicate those if you like. And I'm going to go ahead and make my object layer current, and I'm going to freeze my construction layer. And again, the difference between on and off and thaw and freeze. On and off means you can see it or you cannot see it, but it's editable. So if you were to like do some kind of like erase all, you would erase things that are turned off. But if they're frozen, you can't see it and you can't edit it. It's sort of like turned off and locked. So then locked is just, I can see it, but I can't edit it. So check mark means it's current, and here's the layers you should probably create. Here's the colors I kind of like to use. I've only used 2 different line types, and I've used these pen assignments with my construction layer set to not printable. Typically you would find a layer called def points. You would find there's oh, it's already in use. So you would have a layer called, oh, there it is. I missed it. So delete that layer 1. Here's my def points layer. Let's make it blue because I'm not using blue. Def points does not print. You can see here it's not an option anyway. It's just turned off by default. So if you have things you need to see on the screen but you never want it to print on accident, you just put it on def points, or like I have my construction layer, not plottable. Okay, I have a drawing here, and this is exactly what you're supposed to do. Things I'm going to be looking for. Did you draw it correctly for one? But more importantly, does everything else kind of make sense? So remember that center lines extend past the object a little bit. You can see like this one extends. It's just over my hidden line a little bit. That's a center line, but I can't quite tell, and I don't have all the dimensions on that circle either. So one thing, right off the bat, I can see that things are kind of messed up with my dimensions. I do not need all those zeros. Now, what I like to tell students is you need to know, whoops, dim, the dimension style manager. You need to know how to navigate this, all right? So if I were to create a new layer, and we're going to do more of this later in the quarter, continue, and I create a new layer, you need to know what all of this stuff does on these different tabs and how to navigate it. Okay, probably the first thing you're going to need to know right off the bat is everything from primary units to the left. Primary, fit, text, symbols and arrows and lines. Now here's the thing. All of this information, it's tough to learn the dimension style manager because you have to go in here and figure out what's going on and tell it, I want it, where is the break size? You know, what is 0.09 on a center mark? What does all that mean? You know, in my text, it's like, what is, you know, we don't normally make text at 0.18. It's normally like an eighth of an inch. You know, what does fit mean? You know, do I want to put it beside the dimension or over the dimension line, or with or without a leader? You know, what does all this stuff mean? And it's tough to like change it here and then go back to your drawing and figure out what the heck it's talking about. How many decimal places do you want to use? How about this? Trailing zero, right? I'm gonna do trailing zeros, or I can do precision of one decimal, but I'm going to suppress the trailing zero. So I'm going to say okay. I'm going to close, and nothing happened. Well, nothing happened because all these dimensions, all of them, if I click on them and I look over here, and this is just your properties, if you don't have that up, most drafters live and die with this thing. So properties, pull that up, and I have all my dimensions selected. And here's what I like to tell students is that just select a dimension. Everything that's in the dimension style manager is here in the properties. So if you want to learn what it did, this is where it's at. So let's see, dimension style, standard. I want to put it on copy of standard, right? So right here, copy of standard, dimension style. And you can see I made that change, right? I put the precision at 1 decimal, but I told it delete the trailing zeros. That's why you see 2 instead of 2.0, because I pushed that. But that's tough to go from the dimension style manager to the drawing, see what it did, go back, when I could just come over here, click on a dimension, and where's that going to be? What is that under text? And find that trailing zero, I forget what it's called now, and turn it on or off. So here's a good example. Let's say right here, I have a dimension, and there's a dimension line here, and then there's another dimension on top of it. Now where I typically use this is where I got dimension lines that intersect with walls, and there's lines over lines. But, so you can see, there's two lines right there. So if I just click on one, and I go to my extension line, and I think it's the first one. I can't. Oh. Where is this at? I'm going to select this dimension, and I'm going to turn off the other one. There. So now, see there's only one dimension. Oh, I selected both of them, didn't I? I'm going to pick that one. See there's no dimension line there? So you can learn all your tools for your dimensions from the properties. Select the properties. Last thing, I'm going to be looking to see if you did the LT scale right. So LT scale, this is the line type scale for the entire drawing. And right now it's set to 1. I'm going to set it to 0.75. And you can see all my hidden lines got shorter and my center line showed. I like to draw my own center lines. This will need a center line too, and there needs to be a center running through the whole thing. So you may need to adjust the LT scale per your drawing. So that's like Module 2, the first week of Module 2. If you have questions, send me a message, and I'll try to walk you through anything you might have confusion for. See ya.